If you consider yourself a car enthusiast, the information I'm about to give you might actually come as a surprise to you, because most people don't know that this 2024 Acura ZDX Type S is actually built by General Motors. That's right, my friends. The Ultium platform is used on this vehicle as well as the Honda Prologue, and that'll be it for the partnership between Honda and GM. Now, over the last couple months, we have featured a number of vehicles that use the Ultium platform, including, and most comparable to this, is the Cadillac LYRIQ. Now, this Acura ZDX comes in at about $94,600 Canadian as the way it's configured, or about $3,000 less than the LYRIQ Sport 3 all-wheel drive that we drove and took on a road trip to Michigan a few months ago. In the US, pricing is about $75,000, or about $7,000 less than the LYRIQ that we featured. Powering the ZDX Type S is a two-motor all-wheel drive setup, producing 500 horsepower, or 499 in the US, and 544 pound-feet of torque. We have up to 447 kilometers, or 278 miles of range with the 102 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery. Now, when I charge this up, it's telling me more like 525, so your mileage will absolutely vary depending on how you drive it. Now, some could argue that this is just simple badge engineering. The Cadillac LYRIQ, Chevrolet Blazer, Honda Prologue, and Acura ZDX are all built on this exact platform with the same wheelbase and most of the same components. But there are some differences that come with the Acura. For example, we do have an air suspension system on this that's not available on the LYRIQ, at least in North America. We also have Brembo 6-piston front brakes, which is something you also can't get. However, there are some things that make this feel a little bit more like a GM vehicle than it does a Honda, because even though the exterior and interior are completely designed by Acura, we have things like GM's Super Cruise, which they're calling the Acura Watch 360 Plus. But we also have OnStar, and that's just straight up OnStar. So there are a couple things that make this a little different. But it comes down to what you want your vehicle to look like. I personally like the look of the LYRIQ quite a bit. This is growing on me. This is a little bit more traditional to what an Acura SUV looks like. So if you're more into this type of design language, you'll like it. And plus, I do like this front end. The sweeping lines here, sort of the curves that come up on the corners of the hood, that's a really cool design feature. Is it aerodynamic? Could be, but we don't see that from something like the Cadillac LYRIQ, so I do like the way that the front end of this looks. We have a light up surround on the diamond shape fake grille. I think it looks okay. So while it does share a lot of components with the GM vehicles made on this platform, it still does feel like its own vehicle. It stands out in not only the Acura lineup as a unique offering, but I think it will stand out in the marketplace as something a little different. But I want to jump inside because the interior is quite different from the LYRIQ or the Blazer, so I want to go over that before we take it on the road. When you get inside, you're greeted by the dual display setup. We have an 11-inch driver information screen and then an 11.3-inch infotainment system. This is the first time Acura is using Google built in on any of their vehicles. And it is important to note that it really is GM's infotainment system with a Honda skin on it. I find that the graphical buttons on the side, your little quick menu options, they kind of look a little cheap, especially for this price point. Would have been nice if they looked just a little bit more premium. But the infotainment system works well enough. It has a lot of the functionality that we're used to, but it also has the limitations that we're used to with the new generation of GM infotainment systems. So for example, the driver information screen has a pretty limited amount of data. You have to go into the screen in order to find things like your trip computer or any information you want to actually transfer over to that screen. Plus is with the driver screen, you can switch over to the maps, but you do have 3 different views with the driver information cluster, including that map, as well as the advanced driving assist system display, as well as more of a generic one that has things like your trip computer if that's what you want to have on it. Now, there aren't many buttons that are carried over from the GM vehicles. The HVAC controls are kind of carried over, as well as the controls for the windows, as well as your memory seating buttons. But for the most part, the rest of the interior here is pretty unique to the Acura setup here, and I do like it. It's functional. It's not too over the top. Is it worth the $93,000 that this car costs? I'd say not necessarily. I was expecting a little bit more, but maybe the price is the problem, not so much the actual interior, because I do like the way that this is set up. I just feel that this screen here, which is the same screen that you're going to get if you go with the Honda Prologue, it just looks a little cheap. right? Especially with the big volume button on the side. I just feel that the way that GM has implemented things is just a little bit more premium, again, at this price point. But in terms of tech and features, we have an 18-speaker Bang & Olufsen audio system. That's the first vehicle partnership with Bang & Olufsen for an Acura vehicle. We should be seeing more of those as time goes on, but this is the first. I think it sounds pretty good overall. There are some unique controls in the infotainment to adjust your settings. I haven't seen those on other vehicles before, so you're getting a unique experience there. Up front, we have dual zone climate control with heated and ventilated front seats, as well as memory for both the driver and passenger. There's a third tri-zone climate system in the rear seats, along with the outboard heat. There's no ventilation back there. That would have been a nice thing to have, but there are side window sunshades. Other features include a head-up display, panoramic sunroof, 360-degree cameras, as well as a video rear view mirror. Now, it's not the same unit that we saw on the LYRIQ. It is unique to Honda. It works well enough. The resolution isn't quite as good, and I find that at night, it's just not quite as reproductive of what you would see normally if you had the mirror down in normal position. So quality there, not quite as good, but it works good enough. I'm pretty satisfied with it. And overall, I mean, you're getting kind of all the features that you'd want out of this type of vehicle. There isn't really anything that's missing on it. We do have a number of drive modes. We do have the controller for the adaptive air suspension, so it'll actually lower the vehicle when you park it. Is it a must? I don't know. I mean, it's a unique selling feature for the vehicle, but because it's not a very tall SUV to begin with, I don't see the need to have it. I think it's just a sort of a nice plus. Aside from that, though, the rest of the setup is pretty familiar if you've driven the other vehicles on the Ultium platform. In fact, the steering console here is about the same as what you would get, including the steering wheel, just with an Acura badge on it. Even the key is the same GM key that we're used to with an Acura badge on it. So if you've driven something like the LYRIQ or the Blazer, this should be pretty familiar, which is a perfect segue into our actual test drive. So let's hit the road now and tell you everything else you need to know if you are in the market for the Acura ZDX and are curious to see if it really is worth that price point. Now, I know there's probably people in the comments saying that this is not a ZDX, it's a ZDX. Just listen to how disgusting ZDX sounds. It sounds like some sort of disease. But a ZDX, now that sounds like something I would spend $94,000 on. But would you really, though? Because this vehicle is pricey, and I don't think that an Acura really should cost the same as a Cadillac. Now, that's just me. If this was maybe $10,000 less, then you'd have a compelling sell. But then again, the Honda Prologue is about $75,000. So, yeah, there needs to be a stepping stone between them, but maybe that means that the Prologue's too expensive too. So let's talk a little bit about the vehicle here. We picked this up. Now, it's sort of a hard way to test this week because I actually just flew back from Vancouver. So I picked this vehicle up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then I stayed the night in Mississauga, so I didn't fall asleep while I was driving home after our trip. But that means that when I got our test loop numbers done, it was with 3 people in the vehicle and luggage. So the 4.2 kilometers per kilowatt hour that we did, and the US and regular kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers are in the lower third below, isn't really accurate to what we've done before. So I can't really use that number to compare it to things like the LYRIQ to see how efficient it was. But the fact that we're getting about 500 kilometers, just over that, as I'm driving around here in town, does make it feel like we're getting a little bit better efficiency out of this over the Cadillac system. Now, what's interesting about this vehicle is this will be the only Acura ever built by General Motors and on the Ultium platform, because once Honda got this vehicle, once they got access to the platform from GM, they basically said this is not what we were signing up for. We were expecting better efficiency, better overall power management and energy management. They just weren't happy with it. So they essentially canceled their agreement to work with GM to build a number of electric vehicles. So we will still get this. I don't know how long they're going to make the ZDX and the Prologue for, but they will continue making it, but that will be it. So these will be the only 2 GM-built Honda Acura vehicles. But I'd say that, you know, at about 500 and something kilometers on this Type S is really good, right? You know, if you want more range, in the US at least, you can get the rear-wheel drive only A-Spec. Here in Canada, at least as of filming this, the A-Spec only comes all-wheel drive. We are getting like an extra 25 or 30 kilometers of range, so you're not getting a whole lot more, but it ultimately comes down to how you drive. If you're driving it like a maniac, you're obviously going to get less energy efficiency, just like you would if you were driving a gas vehicle. So it comes down to your own driving style. Now, I have kept it in sport mode because, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to an electric vehicle, whether you're in sport or eco mode, the only thing that's really going to change is the climate system, and then obviously your overall throttle response. So if you're just driving it normally, you're not going to see any real difference in overall energy efficiency. But it is nice flooring it. Oh yeah, I mean, it gets up to speed pretty quick, right? That 500 horsepower, they market it as $499 in the States, but 500 up here in Canada. You do feel it. It is pretty quick. From a start though, like off the line, not quite as quick, but if you are looking to pass slower traffic, or maybe you're trying to get onto the highway, you need to speed up, there's no problems whatsoever. So we'll bring it down to a stop here. I'm going to hold on to my microphone because it'll go. Oh, see, not quite as quick, but still, it gets the job done. No complaints whatsoever. I'm quite happy with it. And in fact, I've come to like this vehicle a lot more than I might have thought I would, because the Cadillac LYRIQ is the one for me. If I'm in the market for a mid-size electric crossover SUV, needs to be luxury, then that really is the one that I would go for. I like the look of it, I like the space, the comfort, everything there is good. So when I got this, I figured, well, it's going to be kind of the same thing, but maybe not quite as good. And that is the case, but I still do like it a little bit more than I maybe had anticipated. I do like the looks of it. I like the comfort. The air suspension, it is smooth. You know, putting an air suspension on a big, heavy vehicle like this, I don't know how good it'll be long term, but, you know, it does seem to work. So if those are things that you're looking for, then the Acura has it. Do you need the 6-piston Brembo brakes up front? I don't know. I mean, most people aren't going to be taking this on the track, and most people, if you're driving the vehicle properly, shouldn't really ever need the brakes. You're going to be using regen, which essentially turns the motor into a generator. You know that's how that works, right? The conventional brakes don't get used very often on these electric vehicles, so having it, I don't know, I mean, it's a bit of a plus, but is it just, you know, on paper, or is there really performance benefits to those brakes? Ooh, now we're going over these bad tracks there. It actually felt pretty good. I'm quite impressed. So the suspension does do a good job. With this Type S, we also have a more performance-oriented damping system, so you do get that. So this is probably the way that I would go. I would go with the Type S personally. You know, the A-Spec looks nice. You're losing out on some of the features. You lose out on things like the air suspension, but you're still getting a pretty good vehicle overall. But, you know, really, if you want the best of the best, this is the way to go. And because nobody knows Acura makes a fully electric vehicle, this thing does stand out. I've had quite a few people checking me out, even though I've only had the vehicle for a couple days now. I've been noticing a lot of people that are just curious. The color, Tiger Eye metallic here, looks quite like a battery. You know, we joked about that with the BMW i7, that it looked like a Duracell. Well, this with sort of a 3-color combination. We've got a black roof, the copper-ish design on the paint, and then the bottom of the vehicle is all silver. No matter what color combination you go with, it actually does look more like a battery than the BMW i7 did, but I actually do like it. And there are a number of different colors you get. You can get a red, a blue, a black, a white, things like that. You know, all the normal kind of colors. But if you do want to stand out, Tiger Eye does work. So people are checking me out because of the color. They're checking me out because they have no clue what this is. And really, I don't think it's a successor to the ZDX. Even though it's got the same name, the ZDX was this really weird, funky car that I actually really liked, and I was really close to buying about 10 years ago. I would have absolutely pulled the trigger on one of those things, and I might still, if I ever needed like a pretty decent daily driver that you're really never going to see on the road. Those were really cool. This isn't quite the same thing, but I get it. They're resurrecting that nameplate, putting it on something that is different, so maybe it gets people talking. That's what we're doing here. We're definitely talking about it, and I have enjoyed it. But the question that I've been struggling with all week is whether or not this is really worth the price. As I enable Super Cruise here on our little highway through St. Thomas, I can show you how that works. But the question that really comes down to is it worth it, right? I don't consider Acura to be a luxury brand. This is a premium brand like Infiniti, like Buick. It's in the middle. It's not quite a consumer brand. You're buying this because you're a little bit more successful. You've got a little bit more money to spend. You want those creature comforts, those luxury features, but you don't have, the luxury budget to buy something like a Cadillac, a BMW, a Mercedes. So pricing this essentially at the same thing as a LYRIQ, for me at least, I would go with the Cadillac. Now, that might not be the same for everybody, so let me know in the comments what you think. But, I was trying to figure out, like, you're buying maybe a TLX Type S? That's what, $65,000 now? This is a big price increase to go up to this. But then again, the TLX is smaller, so an MDX now, I think, is about this price, isn't it? So, is this just the right price then? Or is the MDX too expensive? I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, you do get a good amount of performance out of this. Everything seems to work pretty well. I like the look. I like the interior. The comfort's good. Ride and quietness is all there. So, I mean, everything kind of works well enough. But is it going to be the one that people are going to want to buy? Are people going to realize that this is actually built by GM? Yes, you open up the door where the VIN plate says, it actually says, built with pride by General Motors. And on the inside of the hood, even though there is no place to put things, there's no front trunk, you do have the telltale signs that this is manufactured by GM with GM parts all over the interior there. And even the glass, at least on this model, our stamp on the actual sunroof here does have a GM stamp instead of the Acura ones that are found pretty much everywhere else. So there are some small clues to let you know that this is not like any other Acura ever built. But is that going to help sales, or is it going to hurt it? You're going to have to let me know. We're going to have to look back at this maybe a year from now to see how this vehicle has done in the marketplace, because we always do, I always do that. I'm always checking to see how things have done a year later and seeing how the comments have changed over time as well. So it's why it's so important for you to get into the comments and let us know what you think, not only about the ZDX, but anything else that we're doing here on Test Drive, because we do try to get back to absolutely everybody that we can and keep that conversation going. So make sure you do that. Also, we invite you to subscribe to the channel as well, as it helps us grow and helps us get more engagement, and we can get more content going like this, because we enjoy doing it, and we hope that you enjoy watching it just as much. So as the car continues to drive us into the sunset here, this has been the 2024 Acura ZDX Type S. I'm Nile. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.